Welcome back to the NHL Stanley Cup podcast here on PSSN. Once again, we have the three hockey guys here. We have Chris Lemo and Tim Rogers. Tim, I see you're still growing your playoff beard. It's still going strong.
It's still going strong. My team's still in it. Let's go. Let's go.
Yes, and Chris, the casual spectator. Both of us are casual spectators because both of our teams are out. I'm going to say that every time. And for the last episode when we previewed the Stanley Cup final. So before we get into the matchups, we're going to talk kind of about the how we got here, especially with the Montreal Canadiens making it overachieving. You know, no one expected this. And Chris, I want to ask, why do you think they were so, why is this happening right now? Because again, they were a barely above 500 team and they're playing one of the best teams in the National Hockey League in Vegas. Is that just the nature of playoff hockey, really?
It really is. Playoff hockey is that, like, when people say, oh, this is a better team on paper, in the playoffs, you can always throw out that paper because it doesn't matter. There's a couple of things that matter in the playoffs, as I've been saying the last couple of podcasts now, that's depth and goaltending. And the Canadians have a great goaltender in Carey Price. I know he didn't really show it during the regular season, but Carey Price is one of those guys that has the pedigree. He has the history of being phenomenal in the past in both the regular season and playoffs. So, I think we shouldn't have counted him out. And, I think a lot of people were saying, oh, he won't turn it around. He was bad for most of the regular season, or not really that great most of the regular season. Why would he turn it around now? Well, I mean, you can't really say that about a guy like him because it seems like he can just flip the switch and turn it on whenever he wants. I mean, all you need to know about him is he's a .935 save percentage and 1.97 GAA in the playoffs. I mean, that leads all goaltenders in the playoffs, and it's not like we have a bad goaltending in the playoffs. I mean, Vasilevsky is still around. So it's really that he's leading this team in my mind. I mean, Winnipeg, again, I thought that they were the better team on paper, and I should have gone with my gut and realized that on paper doesn't matter this time of year. But again, Montreal does have enough scoring depth in their lineup, and they just have really good goaltending.
I think we really are starting to see the importance of red hot goaltending in the playoffs. Like we said, Montreal's there hugely because of Carey Price. And think about last year, the Dallas Stars, Anton Khudobin was a huge reason they went that far. Vasilevsky, obviously, even back to when the Caps won the Cup. Holtby was a huge reason for that. But the biggest thing for the Canadians is some of their people that needed to start showing up did. Tyler Toffoli now leads the team in points, and he had to. He now has 10 points, which, although that's not big, they're getting a lot of depth scoring, and I really like the young guns. Nick Suzuki's looking fantastic on that line with Cole Caulfield and Tyler Toffoli. I think that's their most dangerous line. But they're also getting that veteran grit. Corey Perry looks phenomenal in these playoffs right now. And also Eric Stahl, that trade acquisition for them from Buffalo, he's looking very promising for them too. So if they can keep that up, obviously with the red hot goaltending, a big thing that I like about Montreal though right now is their penalty kill. They have the best penalty kill in the playoffs with 4 shorthanded goals. That's pretty impressive, especially in going against a team like, the Maple Leafs, who on paper obviously are better, and the Jets, who are better on paper. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they do against Vegas. But red hot goaltending has been a huge thing, and you can look at it for all 4 teams that are here right now to point to the signs of red hot goaltending.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone really expected the Habs to sweep the Winnipeg Jets, let alone beat them. I remember I said on the last podcast, I actually did have the Canadians because of that momentum. No one expected to sweep, and I think it's safe to say, I don't like pointing the finger at one incident, but I think Mark Scheifele cost them that series because he's a huge part of that Jets offense, and he was suspended for 4 games. And those 4 games were and that one game was the only game that he played in the playoffs. He sent a nice birthday present to Jake Evans because that was on his birthday, in case you guys didn't know that. So yeah, I think he cost him that series. Who knows? Really, that's just the nature of playoff hockey, like we said. So we talked a lot about Montreal. So let's just, I think, dive in to that series. We talked a lot about Montreal, but Chris, I want to get your thoughts on Vegas because they're the clear favorites, and in my opinion, I really think that they're going to stop Montreal's momentum because, in my opinion, Montreal hasn't played because they're in such a weak division. I mean, so is Vegas because Vegas is the only team representing the Western Conference in these semifinals. So, what's going to be the key here for Vegas to get past the brick wall and Carey Price?
Well, Vegas, I think for as much momentum as we talked about with Montreal, Vegas, in my mind, has more because Montreal didn't. I mean, Winnipeg barely, I thought, put up a fight. I mean, the Mark Scheifele incident, as you said, was a momentum changer in that series, in my mind. And I think for Vegas now, I mean, they not only beat Colorado in 6 games, but in my mind, after the first game, they dominated that series. I mean, I know that they lost game 2. I thought they outplayed them that game. Vegas has really played well. And I think that they also have I mean, I think it's Vasilevsky and then Fleury are really the only other goaltenders that can match Carey Price save for save. So, I think, no offense to Connor Hellebuck, who is a phenomenal goalie, but Carey Price and, Fleury and Vasilevsky are just better. So not only will Montreal's opposing team now have a goalie that can match them, they also have some scoring depth here for Vegas that I do think is going to give them the series. Now, the other thing is Vegas had to beat like the top team in the league in Colorado. I still hate that is the playoff format this year and that they had to play in the second round. I mean, in my mind, I would have rather have seen that in a conference final. But I mean, they're coming off beating what a lot of people thought was the favorite to become the Cup champion. And the big thing is they got their big guns rolling. Jonathan Marchessault, I thought, had a great series. In fact, he had the hat trick there in game 4, I believe it was. So they got some of their big guys rolling that were not exactly rolling in that first series that looked like they were struggling. So now they have the momentum going, and I don't see Montreal being able to stop them.
Yeah, Vegas had that original line, if you will, really get going in Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith, and William Karlsson. That was their top line when they went to the Cup, and they showed why. I mean, Marchessault is a true goal scorer. I don't know why Florida let him go in that expansion draft. I think they're still kicking themselves for that one. But William Karlsson leads the team in points right now with 11. A big thing for Vegas right now is the faceoff circle. They're the best faceoff team in the playoffs right now, and it's huge for them. And we saw that in the Colorado series. They kept the puck off Colorado's stars by them being able to take possession off those very important draws. They are, I think, above 50% in the faceoff circle. And again, like I said, is the best. Marc-Andre Fleury is fantastic right now. There's a reason he's up there for the Vezina. Obviously, we all know Vasilevsky is going to win it, but there's a reason Fleury deserves the credit. I think the biggest test and the big key for this series is going to be Vegas's power play versus Montreal's penalty kill. Like I said earlier, Montreal's penalty kill is the best in the playoffs, where Vegas's power play is 13th, tied with the Capitals for the entirety of the playoffs. If they are going to be able to crack Carey Price and crack, this Montreal defense, they're going to need to get that power play going. I think they can. I have Vegas winning this one. I will probably say in 7. I don't think this is going to be as easy as people think. Montreal still has a ton of momentum, and they still have that underdog chip on their shoulder. Everybody loves the underdog story, so I would love to see Montreal go on to the Stanley Cup. I think Vegas is too much of a powerhouse, though. We'll have to see, though.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be easier for Vegas to shut down Montreal's top guys because they were only able to hold Nathan MacKinnon to 3 points in that series. He didn't even have a goal in that entire series. Considering how much he dominated against St. Louis, he was scoreless through through game 5, 4, and 3. And other than that, he didn't even have, or no, he had 2 goals in game 1, but that was the only time he got on the score sheet. So he wasn't that dominant in this series. So Vegas has the potential to shut down. If they can shut down the best player in the league, I have no doubt that they'll be able to stop guys like Toffoli, Suzuki, who else? I'm blanking on names here. Gastal, Kotkaniemi, Caulfield, those kinds of guys. I think they'll be able to shut down quite easily. But we'll see, because Montreal's depth pieces have been doing well. Paul Byron has been great. And obviously Corey Perry, which, from what he's been through, he actually did well in the bubble against Dallas, so I will give him that. But yeah, I think that's going to be the series to watch, because is this Montreal team for real, and are they here to stay? Really is the big question. But yeah, I just think Vegas is too powerful. But you know what? We underestimated that, or Montreal all playoffs. Maybe they'll shock the world and we'll have an East versus East Stanley Cup final. Who knows? Really. So I don't know. Do you guys have any other thoughts to add before we move on to the Islanders series? We're going along quickly here.
Well, what Vegas did to shut down Colorado, I'm glad you brought that up, was extremely impressive. After game 1, I kind of thought that Colorado's forwards were just going to have their way with them. And they really stepped up, and I think nothing against Montreal's forward group, but look, they don't have the star power that Colorado has and the scoring power. So it should be, in theory, a lot easier for them to shut down guys like Nick Suzuki than it was to shut down one of the best players in the game. That's the reason why I think, in terms of a prediction, I have Vegas in 6. I do think, again, on paper, if you were to take away a hot goaltender there in Carey Price, I think Vegas could even sweep this team. But because Carey Price is hot, I don't think you could discount Montreal from taking 2 games in this series. But I do think that Vegas has the blueprint for how to shut guys down, as they showed against Colorado, and it should be easier in this series, like I said. And now they have their offense rolling as well. So the big thing is, as Tim said, is going to be the power play. If they can get that going too, then I don't see how they lose this series.
Yeah, Vegas's defenders really stepped up. Pietrangelo looked great. Theodore looked great. Alec Martinez looked great. He had that beautiful assist to William Karlsson last night, which was an amazing pass and great vision. I think if you look at this as a Canadiens fan, I think this season's a win. I think really no matter what happens to you here, you're looking at it like, okay, we have some really nice young pieces and a great future. Although maybe Carey Price is not going to be able to sustain this red hot level for the entire season next year with an 82-game season. I think if you're the Canadiens, you're going to, even if you get swept, you're going to keep your heads held high. You're going to walk out and know that we were the better Canadian team. You beat probably the 2 best Canadian teams. And on paper, you shouldn't have. So even if, this series does not go Montreal's way, Montreal's going to fight hard. They always do. I think this is going to be a great series. And if you're a Canadiens fan, take this and enjoy it. Enjoy being in the semifinal, because it might be a long time for it to happen again. I know you never know what can happen in the playoffs, and that's why you guys are a big reason that they are here. So enjoy it.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Because, yeah, I definitely agree with you. And the same thing with, like, the Carolina Hurricanes, where, yeah, maybe they underachieved, but the future is bright there in Raleigh. And for Montreal, no matter what happens, it is a win for a season by far, because, again, they were barely above 500. I want to add one last thing about Vegas. What makes me so angry is because it's only their 4th season in the National Hockey League, and their fans have had nothing but happiness. I had to wait 8 years to get to the 3rd round, and Vegas is doing it for the third time in 4 seasons. Like, come on, you haven't gone through enough heartbreak. Teams need to go through heartbreak and down times to get to a Stanley Cup. And as a DC sports fan, and maybe Chris as a Philly fan, that is our teams right now. I had to wait 8 years to get a Stanley Cup. So, but yeah, I mean, what George McPhee and the entire management of Vegas has done has been absolutely incredible.
Well, yeah, you've been through quite a bit, but let's be honest here. In terms of the pain and misery index, I don't know if that even like registers on my scale. It has been nothing but pain and suffering here for Philly fans. I mean, it's brutal. I mean, at this point, the Flyers aren't even like, I get mad about them, but it's almost like you don't even get in pain just because it's just so normal at this point, the suffering. But no, it's ridiculous. The expansion draft rules are stupid. Like I'm sorry, but like and we'll see it again with Seattle, and I'm very curious to see how they handle this. But it's just like I'd rather at this point the Flyers like move and get a new franchise in Philly, because the expansion draft you could like easily get a team right away and win. Like I don't know. I think the way it's set up needs to be overhauled, and this is a perfect example of it. I mean, not that they've had everything handed to them, Vegas. I mean, obviously they've been run pretty well, but I mean, come on, it's a little bit ridiculous at this point.
I'm going to promote your podcast. If you want to hear more Philadelphia fans complaining, go listen to Bad Things Happen in Philadelphia. That is a treat to watch because it's all Eagles. I haven't talked about the Flyers yet, but go check that out. It's a good one. Tim, do you have any other thoughts about the fans and how, Vegas is spoiled?
I will say Vegas is definitely spoiled, but I will say they got humbled last year. I think last year they got seriously humbled by Dallas. They came in there and they basically expected to win that because they're the Vegas Golden Knights. And they got dominated by Dallas. If they have that same mentality against Montreal, maybe then Vegas won't go to the Stanley Cup again. But, I don't like to throw the Long Islanders under the bus. You guys remember we had the fisherman logo, right? Like we weren't our old owner was bankrupt. Like we were there too. Like our team we went to the Barclays Center, guys. Like we couldn't afford Nassau Coliseum. We couldn't afford it. So
I don't know how do you not afford to be able to play at the Nassau
That's
Coliseum?
what I'm saying.
Because it was the same thing in that series in 2019 against Carolina. You go to Nassau, you sweep Pittsburgh, everyone's good. Then you go to Barclays, it's a completely different atmosphere, and then you get swept. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. That wasn't a pretty time.
I mean, look, a lot of teams have gone. I mean, I always remind Penguins fans because now they're all high and mighty, but I'm like, look, if you guys hadn't tanked for Mario Lemieux, you guys were trying to sell your team too and move out in the early 2000s. So let's not forget about that. I mean, hey, my Flyers might be pathetic over the last decade, but at least we haven't threatened to move yet. Yeah. So thank you, Comcast.
About it.
At least our owners have money. Thank you, Comcast.
Oh man. All right, we're getting off topic here. So we're gonna change. We talked about the fans at Nassau. So let's head to Long Island. The New York Islanders versus the Tampa Bay Lightning, a rematch of last year's Eastern Conference Final. Tampa went on to eventually win the Stanley Cup. But, Tim, I'll start with you here. What's different about this Isles team compared to the bubble?
They've played with each other a lot longer. In the bubble, you had the new additions like Pajot and Green who weren't really used to the system yet. And I think the Islanders did great in this past deadline, getting Kyle Palmieri. Everybody thought they should have got Taylor Hall. Well, who won the series? That's all I'm going to say. Kyle Palmieri has 7 goals in the playoffs right now, which is the 5th most by a deadline acquisition for that year. And number 3 on that list is JG Pajot from last year. So Lou Lamoriello knows what he's doing. He's got that winning culture. One thing that surprised me about a Barry Trotz-led team is the Islanders have the most goals in the entire playoffs, which was very surprising to me. Yes, I know Tristan Jarry couldn't catch anything in that Pittsburgh series. But give credit to this New York Islanders team. JG Pageau, the man I mentioned earlier, leads the team with 13 playoff points. Bailey and Beauvillier each have 11. Brock Nelson looking great on that killer bees line, if you will. And the deadline, as they call it, with Pageau, Palmieri, and Travis Zajac, everybody who was acquired on a deadline, they look fantastic as well. I think the big piece, though, if the New York Islanders are going to get going and win this series against Tampa Bay, it's got to be Matt Barzal. He's a huge reason that they won against Boston. He had 6 points in that series, where he only had 3 in the series before. It's huge for the Islanders if Barzal can get going. He scored 3 goals, 3 crucial goals in that series. I would love to see what this Islanders team can do. They are going to run into a red-hot Tampa Bay team, so it's going to be very interesting to see. But I think this is going to be very different than last year. I can promise you that Tampa Bay did not want to verse the Islanders. I can promise you that. So it's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think this will be a great series. And one of the things that's interesting, I was reading an article in The Athletic this morning, and they were saying that in terms of their model that they use, the Islanders, I believe, have been favored in all of one playoff series in the last 3 seasons. And I believe that was last year in the bubble against Florida. So it's a team that everybody continues to sleep on. And, it's not like, I get why, because the lineup isn't exactly the flashiest. Like, again, they don't have like a Steven Stamkos or, a big, like a Kucherov, like a big scorer like that. But they do, again, have a bunch of lines that can play and grind through you pretty well. Now, the big thing will be, like you said, how does that Barzal line counter the Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov line? Because keeping the Nikita Kucherov line, at least, on earth, isolated here, is going to be the key to winning this series in my mind. Because outside of that, I actually think that the bottom 3 lines match up fairly well, because I think that the second line for the Islanders has been so hot with Nelson, Beauvillier, and Bailey. I'd like a little bit more defense out of them. I think defensively they can be shaky, but they do have that clutch scoring factor there. Once, if they get a turnover, they will make you pay that line basically. But it's going to be the battle of the first lines. They have to stop the first line, and they did a good enough job of that in the Boston series against the perfection line, I thought, the last couple games. So that'll be the big story. And then obviously the goaltending matchup will be phenomenal to watch. I mean, I do think, I know that you said that they have the highest goals for in the playoffs. They do, however, for expected goals for the Islanders, they're way above that. So I think their goals for, according to this, is 2.7. Their expected goals for is actually 2.06. So I think in terms of facing Vasilevsky and just natural regression, it'll be maybe a lower scoring series, which is to be expected with the goaltending battle. So I think that this will fall more on the defense there. It'll fall on the first line and the first pairing on defense there of Pelech, who I thought had an awesome series, in Ryan Pulock.
Yeah, but I think, you talk about the Islanders and they're all about their identity. And I think in this series, both teams' fourth line and physicality is going to be the key here. That identity line, as Barry Trotz like to call it, of the Islanders, of Cal Clutterbuck, Casey Cizikas, and Matt Martin, they're going to play a huge role in this series, trying to outmuscle that top line and the entire Tampa team, which I think will be so critical because, the problem with Tampa in 2019 was because they didn't have that physical edge. And that was kind of the same thing with Colorado this year. They didn't really have that toughness factor, and Vegas was able to outbody them and really outmuscle them in that series. So, yeah, it's kind of surprising to see the Islanders offense, score this many goals. But I think the identity line and the Tampa's fourth line will be the X factor in this series. And what I noticed a lot about the Islanders, especially in Game 6 against Boston in that second period, they played a lot on the rush. They really tried to catch Boston on transition. And I think if they stay stick with that game plan, that's really going to catch Tampa off guard. So John Cooper, both teams really have to be careful with their line changes, because I remember I texted Chris right after the second period. That was the best display, or one of the best displays of 200-foot hockey I've ever seen, because the Islanders, even when they went up 4-1, they were still on the forecheck. They never took their foot off the gas, which was remarkable considering how much they were up by. So that, I think this series is going to, I think it's probably going to go 6. However, Vasilevsky versus Varlamov. Who do you think has the edge there? That's kind of a concern if you're the Isles, but I think the Isles are a good enough team that, they don't necessarily have to rely on their goaltender to bail them out. If they make a mistake, they will rely on Varlamov, and he is capable of doing that. But also, I think another question is the Islanders taking penalties, because if they take penalties, they're not going to fare well against that Tampa power play. The Islanders penalty kill is 14th. Tampa's power play is the best in the league.
Yeah, well, speaking of power play, I mean, Kucherov has 13 power play points right now. I mean, he's ridiculous. He's awesome on the power play. And then if you look back to last year's playoffs in the matchup, so this is from that same article I was referencing earlier. Kucherov had a 73% expected goals rate, and Tampa Bay outscored New York 9-0 with him on the ice. So you have to, I mean, I know it's easy to say and hard to do, but you have to be willing to let the second line and Steven Stamkos beat you, but you cannot let Nikita Kucherov beat you. You have to find some way to be able to slow him down in this series. I'm not sure that they'll be able to. It'll be interesting. I mean, they did a good enough job on the perfection line, so they might be able to slow Kucherov down. But I think if you slow him down, it will be a very good series, because I think the rest of the team, like I said before, is very even.
Well, the big thing for Trotz and what he does a lot is he does matchups. So he doesn't just do line 1 versus line 1. And that's kind of what he did with the perfection line in Boston. He had Pajot's line go against that line every time, because Pajot countered Bergeron super well. And I think that's probably the same line that's going to be out there for Pajot to counter Braden Point. And then you could have Zajac or Palmieri work on Kucherov. The physicality is going to have to be huge for this New York Islanders team. As we know, Tampa, their speed, they're dominant. The huge thing for the Islanders is they're going to have to stick to their game, which is physicality, but stay disciplined at the same time so they don't go in the box, which is a very fine line, and it could get very out of hand one way or the other. I really like this Tampa Bay team. I think they're red hot right now. But the huge thing about Tampa, as Chris said, is their power play. Kucherov has 13 power play points. He has 18 points in total. So if you can stay out of the box, you have a good shot of winning this series. You really do. We saw that in, I believe it was game 4 of that Carolina series. Carolina was up 4-2. They gave up 6 power play opportunities to Tampa. You're not going to win games if you give up 6 power play opportunities, because they gave up 3, I believe, in the first period, and they killed all 3. And then it was 3 straight goals for Tampa Bay right after. So you're going to have to stay out of the box if you want to win this series. And to go to the goaltending thing, Vasilevsky is easily the better goaltender. I don't think there's a question about that. The big thing that I could see the Islanders doing is kind of what they did here in this Boston series. Varlamov will start game 1. If he doesn't look great, they'll bring in Sorokin game 2. The Islanders have that ability to do that, which not many teams can say they can. I think Vegas was one of the teams that could say they do it, but then Leonard let up 7 goals, so I don't know if you really still have that ability to do that with Leonard's confidence. So it's going to be very interesting. I think matchups are going to be key, and then the penalty kill for the Islanders is going to be huge.
Yeah, Carolina kind of handed them that series in a way, because they took so many penalties, and with, I guess, how questionable or inconsistent the way the officiating has been, either they're not going to call anything or they're going to call everything. So to be on the safe side, you got to make sure you're moving your feet, because if you're not moving your feet, the more better chance you're going to have of taking those stick penalties, those lazy hooking, tripping, those kinds of penalties. So both teams have to be careful with their sticks and also able to move their feet. And I like how you said, Tim, about how the Islanders are able to go, with Sorokin if Varlamov doesn't, perform well. Tampa doesn't really have that. If Vasilevsky goes down with an injury, Curtis McElhinney hasn't played a single playoff game. So that could be an X factor, but Vasilevsky has been a very durable goaltender, and he can play through an injury because, Rask did play through an injury. It was actually just announced today that he's going to have hip surgery in the offseason, and then he's going to be out till probably mid-January or February. So, yeah, I think it's going to be, the Islanders are going to stick to their game plan, their boring 1-3-1 system, but it works, right? I mean, we saw that, Chris knows, I know very well that system, it works. And if any team can shut down the Kucherovs, the Stamkos, the Points, I'll even throw in and Victor Hedman, it's going to be the New York Islanders and Barry Trotz's system.
Yeah, I do think that Barry Trotz, they have a great system going there on the island, and it works phenomenally well. I mean, it just does. Now, I do have to say, if you're comparing last year's Tampa team to this year, what's interesting is that Tampa's team this year, in my mind, has not been as dominant. But again, on paper, they should be better because, again, they have Steven Stamkos. In last year's playoffs, they really did not. So I think that's another big thing. But down the lineup, their third line hasn't been playing as well. They haven't been getting that depth scoring outside of their big stars like Point, Kucherov, Stamkos. Guys like Andre Palat, Gord, Blake Coleman have not really stepped up this playoffs, whereas the Islanders have had their other guys step up outside of Barzell, Beauvillier. They've had, like we said before, Pat Zajac has stepped up. So it's going to be interesting to see if Tampa can get those other guys going, because if not, then they are going to struggle a bit. I do think as is this game or this series does go probably 6 games. I mean, I have the Lightning in 6. I'm not sure what you guys have, though.
I think that's reasonable too. And Tim, before we go to you, it was so funny because yesterday, Dougie Hamilton of the Carolina Hurricanes, which probably out the door, said, we played a team 18 million over the cap space, which is ridiculous because the cap rules and, the flat cap screwed so many teams. Which is why teams are handing out these big contracts. And it's ridiculous. Like, oh my gosh, Kucherov comes back at the perfect time because there's no salary cap in the playoffs. So I don't know how you feel about that, Tim.
I mean, that's a good point, but I mean, Tampa's going to, until the NHL changed it, Tampa's going to keep exposing it. Why not? But if you look at last year's playoffs, nobody really gave Tampa Bay a challenge except for the Islanders. They were really the only team that gave them a run for their money, where I believe most of the games went to overtime. I know game 6, where Tampa won, went to double overtime. And I know game 2, the Islanders let up a goal with 10 seconds left in the third period to lose that game. They're all tight games. I don't see why this is any different this year. I just personally think that the New York Islanders team's better this year than they were last year. Yes, they don't have Anders Lee, which I think could be a huge blow for this New York Islanders team. But I've started to notice a trend. I don't know if any of you have. Islanders in 6. There's my prediction. It's going to come down to that depth scoring. And the New York Islanders are a very disciplined team. They'll stay out of the box. Barry Trotz knows how to coach a Stanley Cup winning team. I know Jacob knows what I'm talking about.
Yep.
They're going to stay disciplined. They know to keep their feet moving, to not take those stupid and lazy penalties. And they have the depth scoring of Kyle Palmieri, JG Pageau, that identity line, the second line, that Tampa really doesn't have. And I think Oliver Wahlstrom, who was a huge part of the Pittsburgh series, has been out the entire Boston series, is looking like he can come back. for this Tampa series. I think he could be one of those hidden gems or those surprise players that come in and changes a series. And I think a big thing is that these teams know each other. They're basically the same teams. It's just I think the Islanders have a little bit more that Tampa doesn't know about, and that's why I could see Sorokin coming into this series because Tampa has never played Sorokin. They have no idea what he's like. So I think that could play a little bit of a factor into this series. I think this is going to be a fantastic series. I can easily see this going to 7.
Yeah.
I see the New York Islanders going to the Stanley Cup final.
Not biased at all.
No.
Based on your background.
Nope. No, you can't see that.
Okay, I do have to say, so first of all, I was looking at the schedule. So Tampa does have game 7 at home. The Islanders, I don't see them losing at home game 6, so I'm going to switch it to Tampa in 7. I mean, it's just a really hard place to play, Nassau, so I'll go with Tampa in 7, actually. But I do think you kind of brought up an interesting point before in the 5-on-5 play because the Islanders don't take a lot of penalties. Tampa's 5-on-5 play has left a lot to be desired so far in the playoffs. 19 goals ranks 6th in the playoffs right now, which is, I believe, worst among remaining teams. So it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of get it back together 5-on-5, because right now they have been relying a lot on that power play, and against Barry Trotz's Islanders, they might not be able to lean on that as much. So they're going to have to find a way to get going at 5-on-5 to win this series in 7. And if you're the Islanders, like we've said before, just kind of keep on being the same disciplined team that they are. If they take too many penalties, then yeah, I mean, that's going to kill you against you. You cannot win and take penalties against Tampa. You just can't.
Now, my one kind of concern for Tampa is defense, and their best defenseman, Victor Hedman, is currently a -4, and his underlying defensive numbers have not been good. He was a finalist for the Norris, which people were kind of surprised about considering how good Adam Fox and Cale Makar's defensive numbers were compared to Victor Hedman. So he hasn't been great. He has 11 assists in 11 games, but he doesn't have a goal yet. So I think that's definitely something to look out for, because I saw, I'm learning analytics. Like when Hedman's on the ice, the Islanders get more high danger scoring opportunities, those goals in the slot in front of the net and things like that. So that's another thing to look out for, is the Islanders just got to throw pucks on the net, make Vasilevsky work in this series in every single game that they play in. So any other thoughts, guys, before we wrap it up? It was a shorter episode because we're only talking about 2 matchups. And it'll probably be even shorter for the Stanley Cup final.
Just about Hedman, I've been reading a lot of rumors. It sounds like, and I wouldn't be shocked if this is true. I do wonder if he's playing a little bit banged up right now.
Okay.
Not to the point where, obviously, when playoff hockey, you almost have to be, physically held out of the game to not be playing. But I do wonder if he's a little bit inhibited right now. He doesn't look like the same Victor Hedman that we saw last year, and especially in the playoffs. So that'll be another big thing. Like we said before, I think the Islanders are pretty sound defensively right now, especially on their top pairing. So, a Victor Hedman that isn't scoring is definitely going to make this an even closer series than we already have it.
Well, something you said, Jacob, about throwing pucks on net, I think traffic in front of the net is going to be huge for both sides. I think the Islanders really took advantage of that against Tuukka Rask in the Boston series, especially towards the end. I remember they would just have Zajac and Palmieri and everybody just converge right in front, let one of the point men throw it on, dig for that rebound and put it in. And that's just the Islanders' way. So if they're going to have to, win the series, they're going to have to get traffic in front of the net. If the New York Saints are going to go marching in,
we didn't talk about that.
Lightning, they're going to have to, get going.
That was great. New York Saints. Islanders fans are great. It's crazy. Their fan base is so loud. It's not like Boston where they blame everything on the goaltender and they hate Tuukka Rask, but
That's
and the refs apparently.
Well, yeah, That's with
Uh,
everything.
As somebody that hasn't had a good goaltender in our city, I mean, hopefully Carter Hart, is the savior. But as somebody that isn't a good goaltender in the city since I've been born, like, just shut up. Like,
Yeah.
seriously, like, okay, a goalie had, a couple bad games. That happens. I know it's bad timing, but like, if you look at the entire body of work, Tuukka Rask is one of the best goalies in the game. Can we please stop trying to run him, or actually do run him out of town? Because I don't really care if the Bruins are bad or not. So do that all you want, but like, you're being ridiculous if you think that that was the only flaw on that team.
Yeah. Like Taylor Hall not scoring a goal in the Islanders series. That's a problem. So that's going to do it for the Stanley Cup playoffs preview podcast on PSSN. For Chris Lemo and Tim Rogers, I'm Jacob Cherison. We'll be back, hopefully at full squad, for the 2021 Stanley Cup final.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.